Hello and welcome to the latest Let's Read on my channel. This time we're looking at Expert Gamer issue number 69. Nice. From March 2000, which means that we were probably writing these strategies in January or February of 2000. So we'd all survived Y2K. Thank goodness for that. And we were ready to put out another issue. And I think this was my third issue of Expert Gamer. So of course, cover game, Mario Party 2. Big deal. Mario Party is always super popular. Excuse me, anything Mario on the N64, on any Nintendo console. Always super popular. Also on the cover, we got Crazy Taxi. That is actually the game that I covered this month in this issue. So I was pretty excited to see that on the cover as well. Excuse me. And then a couple other games on here. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Fighting game. I feel like this issue actually has a lot of really niche games in it, for lack of a better term. So yeah, like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, kind of a really niche fighting game for the Dreamcast. SaGa Frontier 2, RPG for the PlayStation 1. Dragon Warrior Monsters, role-playing game for the Game Boy Color. And of course, Gran Turismo 2 was the biggest thing ever, and it had just come out, so we were continuing coverage there. I think if you watched the previous Let's Read, you'll know that we had a whole... It was the game of the month in the previous month. And then, of course, as I've been mentioning, always have to have Pokemon on the cover. So here it is, Pokemon Gold and Silver. We're right on the cusp of Gold and Silver being launched in the US at this point. But it already came out in Japan by now. So it was a good excuse to get a lot of coverage rather than maybe running a quick trick somewhere, or maybe the game over of Red and Blue or something like that. We're actually doing basically preview coverage, which I talked about in the previous video. You'll see when we get to it. Anyway. So, get this centered a little bit here. Yeah, so Four Wheel Thunder. This was kind of a spin-off. I think it was console only, but a spin-off to like the Arctic Thunder slash Hydro Thunder, I guess is the more important game, series from Midway in the arcade, but I don't know if this was ever in the arcade. Four Wheel Thunder, yeah, I mean, you know, 3D off-road racing game. That seemed pretty popular in the late 90s, early 2000s. I don't remember this being all that great. 16 tracks, VMU compatibility, lets you save and customize vehicles, game progress, and race replays. I mean, yeah, that's what a memory card does. So I don't remember if you could trade them or anything with the VMU, but it just kind of always strikes me as kind of funny that this is a line in this ad. It's like, well, yeah, okay, I can save my game. Great, that's awesome. Two-player split-screen action. All at 60 frames per second. I don't remember this game being very good. So we're into the bios here. This is one of my favorite parts of the magazine because it was really one of the only places that we could be pretty creative. So let's read what this has to say. We're going to start with John, the editor-in-chief. Having spent the better half of his Christmas break battling through the Japanese version of Pokemon Gold and finishing it just before the new year, Riccardi turned his attention toward Dragon Warrior Monsters. Being a huge Dragon Quest / Dragon Warrior fan that he is, he decided to do XG's DWM guide himself, playing through the game nearly 3 times to bring you our comprehensive 10-page strategy. Now that he's done, he's looking forward to Dragon Quest VII for the PlayStation. So the interesting thing here is, yeah, John didn't normally write strategies for the magazine, and I honestly don't know if he had much of a history writing strategies at all. I could be wrong about that. I reached out to him, and as far as I know, this is the only time he ever wrote one, for the magazine at least. But I didn't ask if he'd done other ones prior to that. But I mean, I can't really judge that too much. I hadn't done strategy guides before I got this job either, so... Dan Leahy, our managing editor, being the Irishman he is, Dan's trying to get out of working most of the month of March. Green beer, corned beef, potatoes, and lots of silly river dancing with the lasses, wife, will be had. Honestly, though, he did take some vacation time and came back a happy man, mumbling about some newfound perspective. We'd guess it's because PlayStation 2 is just around the corner, in Japan anyway. It also doesn't hurt that Dead or Alive 2 has cured Dan of his Soul Calibur addiction. Andy Barron, when not engaged in heated Mario Party 2 marathons, Cyber, one of his nicknames from back in his EGM days, Cyber Boy, has been competing in a local Warhammer tournament at an area hobby shop. Look for a few of the battle reports on batreps.com, which was a site I think he ran himself. And I think it might have been video of some of his campaigns or some of his strategies. I went and looked at the Wayback Machine when I first started researching this issue, and I think I did find an archived version of that site. And if I did, I'll try to put it up on screen right here. Haven't been able to check as of today because archive.org is down right now. But yeah, it was just a little site that Andy had going on the side. Aside from the constant grind of painting hundreds of miniatures, Andy has finally paid off his car and is now setting his sights on a house. He has crushed the opposition, except for Dan, at Soul Calibur, using Valdo and Ivy, the two jiggliest fighters in the game. Okay. Jim Mazurek. Although it seems like the gaming world has come to a grinding halt as of late, Jim can't seem to stop babbling about all the great games right around the corner. You know, like Tekken Tag Tournament for PlayStation 2. TTT's got Jim so psyched that he's already started practicing for the upcoming office-wide tourney in April. He claims that none shall pass his gaming expertise in what he often calls the true king of fighters. Tekken. Todd Zuniga, avoiding the memorial freeze of urban civilization, Todd locked himself in his home for the month, watching snow fall outside and his St. Louis Blues rise to the top of the NHL inside. He also celebrated his 25th birthday. God, we were so young, only to be disappointed that one invited guest, actress extraordinaire Minnie Driver, didn't show. With a heavy heart, he went back to his old mistress, NHL 95 for the Sega Genesis, where he sparked enough nostalgia to light the entire office on fire. I forgot Todd had a thing for Minnie Driver. And then there's me. This month, Greg discovered that if necessary, he could always fall back on a career in cab driving. Crazy Taxi has opened up a whole new world of opportunity for our favorite Canuck. In other news, Greg held his head high after a crushing 3-1 victory over Zuniga's Blues in NHL 95. Yeah, it's old, whatever. He's decided that his hockey skills may not be as bad as he once thought. We'll see how he fares when the final NHL 2K shows up in the next few weeks. And here I said that I can't wait for SEGA GT, and boy, that was misguided. SEGA GT was not a great game. I'm getting an email here. Got an SNK Neo Geo Pocket Color ad over here. I feel like these are getting better. I don't remember what these look like for reference, but I know that they have never looked really all that good. So seeing this where it's just a bunch of boxes is pretty great. Although I'm looking at these now and I'm wondering how many of these actually came out. Like, I don't know that the game Dragon's Wild ever actually got released. I think maybe the rest of these did. But what do we got here? We got like Dark Arms, Neo Geo Cup. I don't know about that one. Fatal Fury, King of Fighters, Samurai Showdown, Puyo Pop, Turf Masters. What's that? Unitron? I don't remember that game. Card Fighters Clash, Crush Roller. I'm not sure that came out. Pac-Man definitely came out because I had that. Bubble Bobble, maybe not. Capcom vs. SNK, and of course Sonic. I loved my Neo Geo Pocket. It was a shame that it didn't last very long. It was so cheap, too. That was the nice thing, too, is that it was a really cheap system to get into. Ace Combat 3 ad. I think we had one of these in the last issue. I don't think it's changed any. That game looked really good. Man, Namco was just killing it in the late 90s, early 2000s. Everything they touched looked amazing at all times. It was great. Okay, let's see here. Every hunter needs a nice gun rack? I thought it said rash there for a second. There's some of our non-endemic advertising. Echo.complex. Mindquarters/media_lab. Alright. All we got here is a table of contents. Nothing really exciting to look at here. Nice big picture of Crazy Taxi. Coming soon. Again, another ad that had been running for a while. Resident Evil Net 3 Nemesis. I believe that was definitely a cover game on one of the issues that we've covered so far. Yeah, so maybe this is my 4th issue now that I'm saying that. I'm not sure. But yeah, not much to say about this ad. I mean, that was another thing. Capcom was killing it back then, especially with their survival horror games, and Resident Evil 3 was no exception. Cannot turn the page. SmackDown. They don't forgive and they don't forget. Man, this is back before it was the WWE. It was still the WWF. So that was before or during the lawsuit from the World Wildlife Foundation. where the WWF lost the F in their title and went to World Wrestling Entertainment. I always find it's a little bit depressing to look at some of these old wrestling ads, because so many wrestlers end up coming to a very young end. Although now that I'm saying that, I think probably the ones, the ones viewed here, what the heck was this kid's name? The 1-2-3 Kid is what I remember him being. He was messed up. He was really messed up. I don't remember if he's still alive or not, but he was an absolute drug addict. Mankind, he's great. Triple H runs everything. Vince McMahon, oh boy. Yeah. And The Rock, before he was covered in tattoos, and before he was quite as big as he is now. I mean, physically. I mean, also probably popularity-wise, but, All right, and we're into the letters here. So, most of these letters are, pretty straightforward. A lot of them are sort of calling out either extra help from guides that we've already done, or telling us that we made some mistakes. Like Supersonic here is just asking about, can't find the cannons and boxes emblems within Sonic Adventure, so we told him how. Having a hard time finding the Mine Thrower in Resident Evil 3, so we told him how. Captain, my Captain. Captain Die Code and Medal of Honor will get you more secret codes. This is the previous issue. Again, it's just a lot of clarifications. Is there a trick to run up walls in Mario 64? My friend says there is. You can't run up walls, however, if you have the timing right, you can jump after hitting a slanted wall. If there's another wall nearby, you can attempt another jump, which might create the illusion of wall walking for a second or two. While this is kind of neat, it's not crucial to defeating the game. GT2 spec advice. So this is from the Gran Turismo 2 guide in the previous issue. Gran Turismo 2, I can't beat the Gran Turismo League World Championship. What car do you recommend I should use, and what specifications? We recommend using the Arta GTR GT. It's a lot of letters. Combination of 700 plus horsepower and some great handling make the whole sequence of races a breeze. Editor Greg Seward can win this trophy in his sleep. It's scary but true. More GT mods. Questions. This is weird. Neo-Nazi weirdness. Tough part that isn't in issue 67's 64 guide. Soon as you get the last golden banana, Hitler showed up with a handful of grenades and a machine gun. Nothing I did, from throwing coconuts to punching his brains out, seemed to do any good. You need more help than we can offer. There is no Hitler scene in Donkey Kong 64. We advise anyone witnessing such a sight check the dosage of their medication. That's a weird letter to include. Correction on Resident Evil. Turok Rage Wars is glitchy. What a shock. Old school Final Fantasy V. Anyway, let's take a look at this letter of the month. I thought this was interesting. Why it may not pay to mod your system. I know you guys have touched on this before, but I've got to ask you, what's the deal with these new PlayStation games that won't play on modded systems? Don't these companies realize that not all of us are into pirating software? Most people with modded systems just want to be able to play totally legal import games without having to buy a second system, so they can find some way to encode discs so that the system will recognize if a game is pirated, so they can't find, I should say. It just doesn't seem fair that in order to play some of the best games out there, like Dino Crisis and Suikoden 2, I have to go borrow a friend's PlayStation because the games won't run on my modded system. And our answer, first of all, for those who are wondering what a modded or modified system is, it's a game console that has had some sort of internal work done, usually the installation of a chip, that allows imports and pirated games, gold discs, to run. Many recent PlayStation games are mod protected, meaning modified systems won't run them. While this is a great way to slap the hands of pirates, it's also a great way to annoy the heck out of law-abiding gamers who just want to play imports on their machines. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like the situation is going to get any better with current PlayStation, but we've heard that the new Dreamcast mod won't be countered by SaGa, mainly because it's so hard to copy GD-ROMs in the first place. This is great news for import fans, and we hope the trend will continue with new systems like Dolphin and PlayStation 2. So what I think is interesting about this, first of all, it's funny that we were having this conversation, 25 years ago. It's still happening today in some form or another. I think it's hilarious that we point out, excuse me, that GD-ROMs are hard to copy because, and I never did this myself. I've never used like a bootleg Dreamcast game because I was very, very much against, and I still am against piracy of games on systems that are current. I have no problem with people using a flash card to play a Genesis game that's been out of print for 35 years, but I definitely don't truck with people pirating games that are on the market right now. But that being said, piracy was rampant on the Dreamcast. And to me, that means it must have been easy to copy these GD-ROMs. I don't know if that was something that we knew or something that, goes back to the fact that that was the idea behind the GD-ROM, is that it would be hard to copy. But either way, it was not hard to copy. My understanding is it was not hard to copy. So, yeah. I just thought that was kind of funny. Though I do remember officially buying something called a DCX disc, which was basically a boot disc for my Dreamcast. I still have it, so I could play the UK version of Shenmue 2, because of course Shenmue 2 got canceled in North America for the Dreamcast, but it did come out in the UK fully translated, so I ended up buying that. I think GameStop, actually sold import Dreamcast games along with that DCX disc, because I got that, and I think Headhunter was the other game. Anyway, the other thing to call out here is that we've got the import pick of the month, which is SEGA GT Homologation Special. Never mind the silly title, it's a new Sega racer, the first real Sega racing game since Daytona USA 2. SEGA GT is that company's answer to Gran Turismo, with more than 100 real cars from manufacturers such as Toyota, Nissan, Honda, Mitsubishi, and more. This amazing looking game hits Japan on February 17th, and if you're into imports, make sure you own a Japanese Dreamcast or a modified US one. You'll definitely want to check it out. A US release is sure to follow later in the year. With graphics like this, who needs Gran Turismo 2000, which of course was the Gran Turismo demo we were seeing on the PlayStation 2 at the time. Well, okay, that's a stretch, but still, Sega GT looks incredible, and if it lives up to Sega's racing game track record, it could be one of the surprise Dreamcast hits of the year. Spoiler alert, it was not. It was okay, but it was no Gran Turismo, which was the problem. Let's look at how many games in the US top 10 are Nintendo games. So, top 10 best-selling games in the United States in October 1999. Donkey Kong 64, what garbage, Pokemon Yellow, Pokemon Red, Gran Turismo 2, Pokemon Blue, Tomorrow Never Dies, that's a PlayStation game, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, Pokemon Pinball, Pokemon Snap, and NBA Live 2000. So, what do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, still 50% of the top selling games, still Pokemon games. This is the end of 1999, and Yellow, Red, and Blue are still all in the top 5. That's insane. But that's what it was like in the late 90s, early 2000s in North America. Although it was interesting to see Tony Hawk's Pro Skater sort of creeping up this list too, and Gran Turismo 2, not a surprise. Japan top 10, Pokemon Gold and Silver, Gran Turismo 2, Mario Party 2. We're making good choices in our issue so far. If we're in Japan, Valkyrie Profile, Momotaro Densetsu 5, Shenmue Chapter 1 Yokosuka. Oh, I didn't realize Shenmue was already out there. Donkey Kong 64, Crash Bandicoot Racing, Powerful Pro, Baseball 99, and Parasite Eve 2. And then our top 10, what we're playing in January, Gran Turismo 2, Soul Calibur, always at the top of the list, Resident Evil Code Veronica, NHL 95, No Really, Mario Party 2, Crazy Taxi, Siphon Filter 2, Dragon Warrior Monsters, nobody was playing that except John, Worms Armageddon, SNK vs. Capcom, Match of the Millennium. More letters. Let's see here. Pokemon Cuteness. December issue's Pokemon section had a section called Charmander vs. Squirtle. Who's more adorable? How can you match Squirtle versus Charmander? It's not fair. It's a kill. We all know Charmander shows Squirtle up any day. I asked all my friends and we agree Charmander is the king of cuteness. God, Pokemon. Preview debate rages. In issue 66, Joe Niederlinder asked, why don't you guys do game previews like EGM? The reason I started buying XG was because there is no other magazine out there who can come close to the quantity of strategies XG puts out month after month. Please don't think quantity is better than quality, because you are not going to find guides of greater quality. The strategies are the reason I became a subscriber. Previews are crap. XG covers the gaming part. For example, the December 1999 issue has guides for 8 different games. Pick up any of the other magazines out there, flip through the pages, and see if they can come anywhere close to 8 guides. Sheesh. See if they can cover 4 games, let alone 8. I am the voice of reason. Please listen to me. For the love of my analog controller, do not change. This is really nice. We're still saying stay tuned as far as previews go, and I do believe we ended up doing previews. But this is a really nice letter. Some really nice praise there. And I mean, the couple of Let's Reads that I've done of these magazines, I'm usually always really surprised by how many games we managed to cover. So it was nice to know that that was being noticed by our readers. When's the Pocket Station supposed to be released? Never. No plans to release it in the US. We heard from a friend of a friend's brother's cousin's plumber's accountant that a new enhanced version of the Pocket Station will be released for the PlayStation sometime in the next year. I don't know if that ever came out. Alright. What's this? L2. I don't know what L2 was. I assume it's clothing. Yep. More non-endemic advertising. Shoot something. Special bullets. Yeah, I don't know. This is a Resident Evil 3 question. The straight Final Fantasy 8 411. Just wanted to tell you guys that your guide on how to defeat Omega Weapon in Final Fantasy 8 was a little off. Your strategy could work, but I have something that's a little easier. Blah, 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 blah. Final Fantasy 6 tricks. This was my ad. So I noticed that there are a few helpful little tips in Final Fantasy 6 that weren't mentioned in the strategy guide. And there's a few of those there. And the answer is cool info. Thanks for the letter. The editor who wrote the Final Fantasy 6 strategy has had one finger cut off for each of the points you made, and he missed. I was the editor. I've got all my fingers. That's a lie. So here we are. I'm going to get on this again. I think I read this whole thing last time. So this is... Since I started doing these read-throughs, I've been calling out these Sega, specifically Sega Dreamcast game ads from Sega itself, where they decided that screenshots suck. And it was sort of a push to get people to go to their website and look at better screenshots. The idea being that printing the screenshots, they would never look as good as they would look on as the JPEGs they loaded online. So it used to be that, and this ad would have been like this, right? And then, excuse me, and then in the subsequent issue, they actually started to put screenshots back in the ads, and then they went back to this. And now they've changed it once again, where they still have the full page ad with no screenshots, but then they bought a 1/3 column ad on the opposing pages and ran screenshots. And not great screenshots, I have to say. And it comes with interesting text where it says, if you're too lazy to go see this awesome game for real, here are some motionless 4-color dots on 20-pound, 30% recycled paper that do the game no justice whatsoever. For example, frame 2 can't show how the game got tired of playing patty cakes with you, blew past, and made you snort tailpipe for miles. Or how you can modify steering, suspension, gear ratios, and tires on 12 different rigs for varying weather conditions on 16 tracks, or that your trail brake power slide on turn 8 slung enough gravel to start a ready mix factory. So stop putzing around and see it for real at sega.com/games. I don't... But like this original ad, it still says under the logo, screen grab sucks, see it for real. So it's like, this is the ad, but then this is the like, well, you know, that didn't really work. People aren't going to the website to see pictures. So here are the pictures, but then we're going to go out of our way to tell you how much the pictures suck. I don't know, it's so bizarre. It's so bizarre. Sega was doing some weird stuff. Front Mission 3, I remember this being a big deal when it came out. Just because it was a series that had been around for a while, and I think this was the first time Square ever localized it and released it in North America. So that's kind of neat. I never really played it. We're getting into tricks. We're going to blow through these pretty fast because the tricks always take up a ton of space. But yes, here we are. Tricks. How many pages? Let's see. We're starting on page 22. Are we going to remember that? Probably not. We got a bunch of Dreamcast tricks here. Then we're going to get into the N64 tricks. Remember, we started on page 22. More N64 tricks. You know, for this system being like the least successful of Nintendo's systems, boy, was the N64 popular. More tricks for N64. This is so weird in a post-internet world. How many pages we spent on tricks. I still can't get... I know I say that every time, but I still can't get over it. Finally into PlayStation. We are 10 pages into tricks so far. More PlayStation. The Lords of Lunar minigame. More PlayStation. Oh, here's an ad for VGOdirect.com or UGOdirect.com. I don't think this is around anymore. But I do like this extra card that you can pull out. All these games that were $50, $45. Could get an Electronic Gaming monthly subscription for $20 for a full year, or $35 for 2 years. Still in tricks. We're now at 20 pages of tricks. There's Top Gear Pocket 2. Of course, this was from Vatical Entertainment. They're not around anymore, but they were big Game Boy Color publishers. I remember talking about this ad in the previous issue, where I don't think much of the game. I don't remember. I never really played it, but I love this art. I've always loved this cover art for this game. It stands out. I should play it sometime. Why not? We're into Game Boy tricks. There's ZDNet. A ZDNet ad, which of course Ziff Davis, which is the umbrella under which Expert Gamer and EGM and OPM were all published. There's another page and a third ad for a SEGA game. A cool ad for Zombie Revenge. I mean, it's kind of gross and, you know, zombie-ish, which is great. That's what it should be. It definitely shows off the feel of the game. Again, screen grabs suck. See it for real at sega.com/games. To really understand how decomposed these zombies are, you have to be in close personal contact, Stick thought as he smashed his fist through the brain-dead ghoul. But this was no time for theory. 3 new bone bags were moving in fast, and Stick had lost his gun. They charged. He wrecked the first one with a series of quick uppers, clocked another one with an elbow pop, and dropped the third guy with a reverse rocket crotch kick. Then he spotted his gun. Unfortunately, it was stuck in his face with a zombie behind it. "Yo, voodoo child," said Stick, "your trigger finger's missing." Wow. And then again, there's a little blurb here about how much these screen grabs suck, which they really kind of do. We're still in codes. We're still in tricks. Okay, we finished tricks, actually. So what was that? 22... What we did? 44, 45, 46... 25 pages of tricks. All right, game of the month. Mario Party 2. Fun-spirited multiplayer madness. After playing the original Mario Party to death last year, we found ourselves begging for more. Fortunately, with new adventure boards and more minigames, Mario Party 2 picks up right where the first game left off. MP2 has more features than the original, including a save system, improved gameplay mechanics, and more minigames. The multitude of multiplayer tactics will appeal to gamers who relish the idea of competition. With a variable AI that can challenge the best of us, the one-player game ain't too shabby either. Needless to say, Mario Party 2 won out as Game of the Month for one main reason: it's insanely fun. And it's also insanely popular. This was written by Andy Barron. So we'll read his little quick review of it over here. It's time to part. P-A-R-T-Y. Nintendo and Hudson have teamed up to create a sequel to their hot-selling multiplayer Kart. That is so old-school EGM. Mario Party 2 features 6 adventure boards, one of which is hidden. It opens after you play through the first 5. A healthy number of minigames and an improved level of difficulty. The addition of a save feature and new spaces, however, truly make this a game worthy of the Mario Party name. Remember the hectic gameplay and cutthroat action from the first game? You'll find plenty of it here. After you've played through the adventure boards, there's still more for you to do. Minigame Land offers you a chance to not only hone your gaming skills, but to open up a few more secrets as well. While it may not be all that different from the first game, MP2 is still a blast to play and well worth checking out. One of the things that he did here that I really like, because I mean, we're going to get into this, and it's mainly just a collection of small minigame strategies. But one of the things that we were getting sort of pushed to do was to add more personality to our writing. And I feel like EGM and EGM2 were always really good about this anyway, was we tried to be a little more casual, especially when it came to naming and talking about the other editors. I think every now and then it didn't work. It led to like in-jokes and sort of personality quirks that if you didn't read every issue cover to cover, you definitely weren't going to understand. But I guess you could look at it, you could flip that around and say that if you were reading each issue cover to cover, even though this was a strategy game magazine, you would pick up on this stuff and it would be a little bit rewarding. But anyway, so what he did here is in the intro is he had basically gathered all of us to play a lot of Mario Party 2 this month. I remember that. And because, of course, it shines as it's meant as a multiplayer game. You can play it single player, but it's a multiplayer game. So, you know, you need to really play it in multiplayer to really have the experience. So anyway, one of the things that I think he really did, was a cool idea, is that he just did little bios for all of us. So I'm going to read these. So Andy Cyberbaron, he's the guy who wrote the strategy. Why he wins. As a rule of thumb, Andy doesn't attack any specific player until the end of the game. Then, when it's obvious who the biggest threat is, that person becomes his target. Andy often gets laughed at because of his stone-cold responses to taunts. His solid gameplay skills help him keep in the top ranks. His personal advice, pretend that you're facing a computer opponent. It's weird. Why he is hated by the others. I think we wrote these for each other. If Andy could just wait a sec before starting the mini-games, other players might at least know the rules. And if he says push A, that usually means push B. His tactics enrage us, making him the target for the purloined star. So that is absolutely grounded in truth. So Andy had played a bunch of this before he'd asked us to sit down and have sessions where we played. And in Mario Party, you're on a game board, and then when it's time for a mini game, I think it's either if you meet each other on the board or at the end of each round, there's a 4-player mini game. And of course, it would always show a tutorial screen showing you how to play the game. Andy would blast right past those every time, and it was infuriating. And I mean, you know, I think part of it was because he already knew how to play the games because he'd been playing this game. But part of it was to make sure that we didn't know how to play the games. So, yeah, that was an Andy thing. Dan Leahy, why he wins. Practice, baby, practice. Dan has to make up for a lack of natural gaming instincts by logging extra hours. It happened in Soul Calibur, and it happened here. What he lacks in ability, he makes up for in competitive spirit. Leahy also likes to play the underdog. Pity me role to perfection. Now, if he could just stop guffawing at Zuniga's dumb jokes, he'd be in business. Why he's hated by the others. Dan seems to be favored by the game. We guess that's because he's always last. Mario Party 2 gives him every chance to win, even handing stars over for free 2 or 3 times per game. Having him win is almost an insult. I kind of like putting this in here because it calls out how Mario Party does this, where it's like there's a balancing element to it, where the game will just sort of give the last place player a chance to win. Todd Zuniga, why he wins. Todd is the word master, speaking a mile a minute with what's known as his BSPR. He seems to hold a spell over all other players when the time comes to talk. The time comes to talk them into saving his Weasley bum from a good star pilfering. He also has the ability to get Leahy to chortle in mid-button push, but mostly he tries to get stars from Toad. so no one ends up hating him personally when it's BSPR time. I don't remember what that's a reference to. Why he's hated by the others. Todd is known around the office as the minigame guy. He'll tear your butt apart in the slot card derby, and his uncanny ability to pick the right color in Bowser's Big Blast makes most people puke. Some say he works for the devil. The Canadian guy's me. Why he wins? That's simple enough. That's simple enough because he's Canadian. He's got the rest of the XG are so convinced that he's a nice guy, that he's someone you can trust, someone who would never stab you in the back. Those fools. When they least expect it, Greg turns on them. Nothing like making allies only to rip them to pieces at the 0 hour. That, and he's got the quickest fingers this side of Lake Huron. I would say that the people that that I race with every week in Gran Turismo 7 right now would probably agree with that. I like to make alliances on the track, too. Before I pass them. Why he's hated by the others. Greg has the solid gameplay to give him the edge. That and the fact that the game often hands stars over to him. Come from behind victories are Greg's mainstay. In one turn, he once nabbed 4 stars and went from last to first. What can I say? Skill, baby. And finally, Jim Mazurek. Why he wins. He doesn't. That's right, kids. Jim just flat out stinks at Mario Party 2. The minigames often begin too slow and are over too quick for this talented XG trophy carrier. I just can't pull off my guard parries, stated Jim. The freaking controller is busted. We think his problem is the fact that he's too smart for the minigames. That plus the fact that he just can't bring himself to steal a star from Andy Barron. Why he's hated by the others. Jim Hardcore Mazurek is hated for his brash arrogance. The fact that he's a perennial contender in office tournaments makes it easy to dredge up dislike for Jimmy Boy. Of course, that makes him all the more fun to beat down. Also very true. Also, I'm willing to bet that this was a game that Jim did not like, because he was a very hardcore. He is a very hardcore guy, and this would have been a baby game. Anyway, yeah. So we're gonna get into a bunch. We describe all the different adventure board locations, all the different items you can buy, and why you should or shouldn't buy them. And then Andy goes through the various adventure boards, as well as I think they're all the board-specific mini-games, which is pretty cool. That's kind of the only way to really cover this, right? Nice layout. Good use of space. This is something I think that we at XG were quite good at. And I mean, there's a lot. This game was big. This game is really big. Yeah, so then these are the battle minigames. So I believe this is when you would both land on the same board space. I think. I could be wrong about that. Yeah, battle games and then the 4-player minigames. God, there were a lot of them. What to do when you have an odd number of games in this format? Art. Official art. It's the best thing. It's still going. Look at all these games. And I don't have much to say about any of these because I didn't really play. I mean, the time that I played this with the XG crowd was probably the last time I really seriously played this game. Probably the first and last time. So there's a couple of things on these pages that I like. So final game pointer. So we've gone through every single mini game in the game in our magazine, along with the 3 hidden mini games. And then final game pointers. One is win by losing. When you're playing a multiplayer game and you're teamed up with someone you want out of the picture, you can always throw the game. This will not earn your partner's appreciation. It's weird. Earn the bonuses. Remember that you can use mushrooms to earn coins. Roll doubles with a basic mushroom to earn 10 coins. Roll triples with a golden mushroom to earn the amount rolled. Building up coins. If you want to earn some coins, play a bunch of small games rather than one big one. If you play for a long time, the game will start leeching away everyone's loot. Magic 10 rolls. Is there a way to get 10 with every roll? It seems like it is possible. Wait about 4 seconds until the pitch of the die winds at high pitch. If you roll it this time, you should roll a 10. It's interesting. Map of minigame land, minigame stadium, minigame land, 3 types of games. So I also like this, and this is another, I think, great example of he had everything covered that he needed to cover in the format that we had as for the layout, and he had, a quarter of a page left. And I like this. Comparing Mario Party 1 and 2, how does the sequel stack up? The original Mario Party was much more intense compared with its watered-down sequel. The amount of interaction with the one-player stuff was more in-depth and seems drastically reduced in Mario Party 2. There are fewer adventure boards, though now each one has a lot more to interact with. Mario Party 2's difficulty level has been toned down. For example, you can no longer lose coins in mini-games. There are some marked improvements, however. You now have the option to save during one of your games. In addition, you no longer have to use multiple players to earn coins. This frustrating aspect of Mario Party has gone the way of the dodo. Comparing the minigames, some favorites have returned, although now they're slightly changed. It may sound strange, but the games of old seem to inspire more cutthroat play between players. The new politically correct Mario Party ensures that everyone will be a winner. It's interesting to call it politically correct. Anyway, that was Mario Party. And here we are on to the game that I covered this month, Crazy Taxi. And I was excited to cover... I was excited for a few different reasons. First of all, the previous month, all I had was the second half of my Tomb Raider walkthrough, which I had been super proud of the first half where we were doing maps and everything like that. It was a lot of work, but I was really proud of it. And unfortunately, the game ended up being, I think that was Last Revelation, and the game ended up being way bigger than we thought it was going to be. So we split it in two, and the second half, like the first issue walkthrough was probably a quarter to a third of the game covered. So the second issue, of course, I didn't get as many pages, or I didn't have as many pages as I needed. So it ended up being just a bunch of big walls of text with like very little imagery, no maps. I wasn't. It was just a step-by-step walkthrough of each level, and I wasn't crazy about that. I'd wished for something more. That was also the issue that we covered Gran Turismo 2. So while I helped Jim with the GT2 strategy guide, I didn't get to work on it very much, which I was kind of bummed about. I understood why, and it made sense for the magazine, but I was bummed that I didn't get to do it. So, yeah, issue 68 I wasn't super happy with in general. Wasn't really proud of it in any way. So it was nice to have a full game to play again and to write about again. And also, Crazy Taxi is an incredible game. It still holds up. I went back and played it for probably the first time in at least 15 years to get some footage that you're probably looking at right now. And boy, does it hold up. It is such a good game. And sadly, in my opinion, the first one, because there have been there were two sequels at least, and then there's been spin-offs and stuff like that. But the first one is still the best one, in my opinion. But anyway, yeah, I was super excited to get to play it and to write about it. And I've always been really proud of this guide. So let's take a look at it. Of course, it also had that great soundtrack by, oh my gosh, is it The Offspring? I think it was The Offspring. I'll have to look that up. Anyway, go make some crazy money. Crazy Taxi is the driving game that Dreamcast owners have deserved ever since the system was released. It's been a long time since an arcade conversion has been so impressive or so addictive. You literally won't be able to put this game down. Literally. The following pages outline how to get through the 16 mini-games in the Crazy Box. Doing so should help you master the techniques required to get a Crazy license in both arcade and original modes. It looks like Sega is going to start the new millennium right with the release of Crazy Taxi. This game is a must-buy for anyone who craves the excitement and adrenaline rush of arcade gaming at home. Special thanks to Joe Rickshaw Ribicki and Todd T-Zone Zuniga for their crazy skills. So that was the other nice thing, and every now and then this would happen, and I found it happened a lot with Sega games and with Dreamcast games, was that we all sat in cubicles, and there were 3 magazines in the building, so there was like XG in one section, then Official PlayStation Magazine, then you go through this little corridor, and then there was Electronic Gaming Monthly. And we're all sitting in cubicles. So when we were sitting there playing our games, a lot of times we'd be playing with headphones on or with the sound down a little bit, but you wanted to be able to hear it, obviously. But it was easy to walk by and see what somebody was playing. And if you were playing something that looked interesting, people would stop, and they would stare, and they would ask to play, and they would get into it. And so that's what happened with... Todd sat next to me anyway, so we were always chatting and we knew what each other was working on and everything like that. But Joe Ribicki was an editor at the Official PlayStation Magazine, and I'm sure he just saw what I was playing based on walking past my desk while he was on his way to the kitchen or something, because the kitchen was right down in the XG area. because I mean he was working on PlayStation games, so Crazy Taxi, you know, they didn't do Dreamcast over there. So anyway, he ended up stopping and playing it a lot with me, and so he ended up contributing to this a little bit, which was great. So yeah, that was another perk of playing something fun and exciting and interesting to look at, and Crazy Taxi was definitely that. So yeah, the Crazy Box was a series of, I don't know, 10 minigames? Maybe? Let's take a look and see. Maybe 15 minigames that were meant to teach you these different techniques. Which are like, you know, were done by basically manipulating the drive, reverse, brake, and gas buttons in different ways. So like a crazy dash was I think the way it worked is if you shifted into drive, you were in reverse and you shifted into drive exactly at the same time that you pulled the gas trigger on the controller, you get a burst of speed. Like, think that was a crazy dash. Crazy stop was similar. I think if you hit the brake and stop at the same time, no matter how fast you were going, the car would come to a dead stop. Crazy drift, when you were turning, if you shifted into reverse and then back into drive while you were turning, you could make the car drift, which was super important in the game. Crazy drift jump was basically if you were driving along and you wanted to, say, go left when you were towards a jump, but you wanted to land and turn left rather than jump and then turn left, you would drift onto the ramp so that your car was facing that way. So when you landed, you could like do a crazy dash and take off in that direction. So stuff like that. That's what these games were built to teach you how to do. The other thing that I have here is some crazy tips. Is the very first thing any rookie cabbie should do when he or she turns on Crazy Taxi is go to the options screen and turn the traffic down to easy. More traffic technically means more chances at a crazy through and a higher tip total, but it also means far more collisions and frustration. The only other useful piece of advice is to concentrate on cleaning each section of the arcade and original maps out of red and orange customers. Once that's done, grab a green or yellow fare and move to a new section of the map. It's true that the red and orange fares are lower, but the time bonus you get for an almost assured speedy rating is what will ultimately get you the $20,000+ score and the coveted crazy rating. So you need to understand how Crazy Taxi worked in that you're in this open world, you're surrounded by potential fares, which are just people standing around, and they have different colored rings around them. And depending on the color of the ring, that dictates the distance between where you pick them up and where you have to drop them off. And so the yellow and green ones, I believe, were... What did I just say there? Yeah. The green or yellow fares were always high dollar fares, which meant you had a lot of chances for tips, which was more money as you were basically building up a multiplier on your way to your destination. But it would take a long time, so it took a lot of the game clock to get there. And while you would get a time bonus for a speedy delivery, it wasn't necessarily enough to keep you going. Whereas the red and orange fares were much shorter. They weren't worth as much, but I always found that if you got speedy deliveries on them, because where it's a shorter distance, you had less chance of screwing things up. The time bonuses would start to add up, and you could just play a lot longer. God, I love this game. All right, let's look at some of the character bios here. So Axel, when he's not jamming with his punk band or cruising for honeys, Axel can be found tearing up the streets in what he describes as the coolest job out there. Axel's only interested in getting from point A to point B as quickly as possible. Still, he wants his customers to enjoy the scenic routes he chooses. Axel's cab is the best all-around vehicle in Crazy Taxi. Although it doesn't really excel in any one area, it doesn't lack in any aspect either. Any budding cabbie should be able to take on the Crazy Box, arcade, and original modes with some modicum of success with this 1960s convertible monster. True artists may want to consider one of the next 3 cabs, though. So he's sort of just the basic all-rounder. BD Joe wants his customers to get there on time, but not without making them feel welcome and appreciated. In fact, that's Joe's biggest concern, that his customers be happy. Whereas a lot of other cabbies may just look at the people riding in the back seat as another fare, Joe's main goal is to put a smile on their faces. He likes to talk, tell jokes and stories, do card tricks, and even play some music for them if that's what it takes. BD Joe's cab is the fastest of the bunch, and it doesn't even take a hit in the handling department with all that speed. The acceleration isn't that great though, and neither is the traction over grass. It's a good cab to use if you have to go a long distance over tarmac. So these are some of the well, they're all of the Crazy Box mini games, and these are all hand-drawn maps. We weren't given any official maps here. So yeah, this is a great example. So this zigzagging path, you want to use, you had sets of bowling pins set up, and you wanted to use like a crazy drift so that you hit them broadside and knocked over as many as you could and got a strike. You had to do that all the way to the end. That's what these games were like. This is just like the longest jump. This is popping a certain number of balloons. This is just going as fast as you can. They're pretty cool. Let's look at Gina. Gina's all about the money and adrenaline involved in driving a cab. She doesn't care as much about the customers as she does a good tip. The girl needs something to help her spend some coin on her ride. Her mother always told her she could be whatever she wanted, and all her friends wonder why she's not a model or a career girl. Life's too short to get bogged down in complex things like careers and relationships, she replies. When Gina's not cruising for fares, she can usually be found tweaking her cab looking for a little extra speed. Gina's cab has incredible acceleration and stopping distance, but the lightweight makes any sort of collision really detrimental to its speed. Gina was the cab that I normally use. Not at first, but as I got better at the game, because if you could avoid the collisions, it was nice and fast. And then there's Gus. At 42 years of age, oh god, he's the old man. He's 5 years younger, or 6 years younger than me at this recording. Gus no longer suffers from the wild streak his three younger associates do. However, back in the day, Gus was the original crazy taxi driver. In fact, he founded the Crazy Taxi Cab Company. The idea came to him one day when he had a customer who needed to get somewhere in a huge hurry. Without the use of maps, road signs, or even a care for anyone's personal safety, Gus got him there in record time. The rest, as they say, is history. The cab Gus drives reflects his age. Big, heavy, and covered with chrome. It's like a rolling piece of automotive history. The weight means acceleration and stopping power aren't great, but collisions present no problem for Gus. So yeah, going through all these different hand-drawn maps. These were fun to make. They're pretty easy because these maps are pretty simple in general. And then you get into the S ones, so Crazy Through, Crazy Party. This is an insane... you have to pick up 7 different customers and take them to the goal within 1 minute and 40 seconds. Crazy Parking, this is actually based on a section of the level. And then Crazy Attack, I believe, is the entire city. So again, we drew this map. I seem to remember us drawing this map by hand. I think. Anyway, you might have noticed these. So again, just to keep things consistent and put a little personality into the magazine, we decided that myself and this is Joe Rubicki, who was at Official PlayStation Magazine, we would also get bios written that were written by Todd Zuniga. So this is where the thank yous came in at the beginning of this article. So let's look at Surly. Surly Seward of Canadian cabbie fame dawdles from fair to fair with the care and decency of Kenny Rogers in Six Pack. It's a pretty good reference. His primary goal of trekking from spot to spot is to get digits from the honeys. Electrifying yet careful, this Nordique contradiction is known for his ability to literally scrape paint from the doors of other cars without hitting them, courtesy of a complex metaphysical theory he thought up while heading to Tower Records for Lionel Richie's latest greatest hits album. Why does he continue to cab? So he can pull in enough cheddar to charm the likes of Bookstore Girl, a tawny-haired femme who remains nameless but usually works the third register from the door. So there was, and I don't even remember what bookstore it was, but I went shopping with Todd at one point, and there was a bookstore we used to go to, and there was a girl there that I was very attracted to, but did not have the guts to introduce myself. That's what he's referring to there. And also calling out the ability to literally scrape paint from the doors of other cars. So going through the game, there's a lot of traffic. And if you, I mean, it's kind of like, in a way, oh my gosh, what is the game I'm thinking of? Burning. Anyway, you got tips for how dangerous you could drive without hitting things. And so if you went into oncoming traffic, you would get more tips and it would multiply. And if you could, I think if you hit other cars without like having a major collision, so literally scraped them, you got tips as well. And I got really good at that. I played the game a lot, so I got really good at that. Burnout, what I'm saying. It's similar. If you ever played a Burnout game, the idea was similar. Anyway, I got really good at it. That's what he's referring to. And then we got Rickshaw, Joe Rybicki, a stellar power driver with all the attitude and brute force of a fighting cock. Rickshaw Rybicki rifles around turns with no regard for the trivial lowlifes that cross his path. His holier-than-thou rockstar sensibility endears him to few passengers while he glowers with a creepy ersatz smile. Most complaints stem from riders who don't appreciate Rybicki's rare ability to read and drive, his right hand holding a book, his left glued to the steering wheel. His cabin goal? To store up enough cabbage so he and his dame can go overseas and follow New Model Army the way silly Americans erroneously follow fish, and to drive a cab through Captain Concave's chest. I have no idea who Captain Concave is. So he's called Rickshaw because there is actually a fifth cab that you can unlock in the game, which is literally a rickshaw. It's someone pulling a rickshaw. I don't know if I have a picture of that in here or not, but anyway, he liked to plays that. So the crazy attack, I just wanted to look at this real quick because this is the full. I think this is the full map. I think. I could be wrong. I think it is. Yeah, it is. So when you play in the original map, the original arcade mode, like this is the actual road map of the game. So you would start here and you come through here and there's like this big downhill section along the waterfront. And then you get into like the town area. There's a parking garage right here. Then up through the KFC, and then there's this big hill you drive up that's covered in grass. The church is right here somewhere. There it is. And then you go around this corner. It's like a bus station, I think, or a train station down to the stadium. Then this little section of highway, and you're into like the downtown area with the mall over here. And then you can come back up into the start area. And so the final test is to do a full circuit of the arcade course within 4 minutes. So I have a couple of tips here, but the thing that was really important about this is that this is actually, in my opinion, and I think I said this at some point in the guide, is that this is the best way to play the arcade game, in that you want to find fares that will actually work you all around, and you can do a full circuit of the entire level. That's the way to sort of keep the clock going, and that was the real strategy in becoming good at this game, was figuring out which fares would take you where you needed to go, because especially around this area, it was really, really easy to, especially going in front of the stadium, find someone who wanted to go like back to the church or back to the helipad or something like that, where what you wanted to do is find someone who gave you a reason to do this highway section, which sucked because it was really long and there were no fares in there, and to get you into this downtown area. But again, it was really easy to get turned around because in this area, you can't see it because of this 2D map, but you're just surrounded by buildings, so it's really easy to lose your perspective and get lost. And so I find, even when I was playing this for footage for this read-through, that it's so easy to get into a loop where you're just going back and forth in this section. And I mean, it's fine, you're making money, but it's whittling down time. And what you really want to do is find the people that are going to get you out of here and back up towards the start, and then just do the whole thing over again. So that's kind of the thing that I call out here in arcade mode. The whole key to getting the coveted crazy license is to consistently pick up red and orange fares. Even though driving through the streets is a hectic experience, good cabbies are always aware of the surroundings. As you're streaking towards your current goal, you need to watch for red and orange dollar signs floating nearby and plan to go to them the moment you drop off your current customer. If after you've pretty much cleared an area of red and orange fares, it's time to pick up a green or yellow customer and use them to move you to a new section of the map. Ultimately, the best way to run this course is to do an entire circuit, starting and finishing around the big hill with the cable car on it. The following areas are great places to get a lot of money and time bonuses. So KFC in the church, in around the mall, the Piazza Stadium, and the lookout tower. Rickshaw wonders, why does the guy with a dozen roses always want to go to KFC? Has the term going Dutch really taken on a whole new meaning? These 4 areas are the best places in arcade mode to make some crazy loot. Being efficient, quick, and smart will keep you playing for a long time and ultimately net you an amazing score. Whatever you do, don't spend your time searching for a red fare. If there's not one within 5 seconds of your current position, then settle on a yellow or green customer. You might lose out on time a little, but chances are the place they're taking you will have loads of red and orange fares with which you can make up for lost time. So then the other thing about this game is that it included what was called Original Mode. And Original Mode is a completely new map. And I call it out here that it's quite different from the arcade mode, which is both a good and a bad thing. It's good in the fact that it requires you to learn a whole new group of landmarks and driving styles. It's somewhat bad since the beginning of the course seems to be really spread out and confusing. I really didn't like this Original Mode. The map is really, really confusing. I could never make any rhyme or reason of it, and for some reason the pop-up in that map was terrible. Like, areas would just pop into view. It was really bad, and it was something that we weren't seeing a lot on the Dreamcast anymore. So yeah, it was a pain in the ass. The different ratings you can get, you always wanted to go for that crazy license. And then here is the rickshaw I was talking about, the hidden cab. That's right, there's a reason Mr. Rubicki is called a rickshaw. If you manage to finish all the Crazy Box minigames, and who wouldn't with the help of this spectacular guide, you'll be rewarded with the infamous rickshaw. After attaining this uber cool cab, just push up at the character select screen in order to drive it. The rickshaw is quite noticeably slower than any of the actual cars in the game, and it has a real aversion to any sort of collision. Even the lightest tap may send you careening out of control. However, this thing accelerates like crazy and stops on a dime. Not only that, but the rickshaw handles like a dream. It's so nimble that darting in between heavy traffic is almost too easy. Both Surly Seward and Rickshaw Rubicki swear by this thing. Using it will put you on the road to obtaining a score of more than $20,000 in no time at all. So then we also had this one other bio here. I don't remember how I found this guy, or if somebody pointed him out to me, but Dollar Mendy, I'm sure I'm not saying that right. If you happen to be a part of India's urban middle class, there's no way you could avoid Dollar Mendy, a 31-year-old Sikh who's the toast of Bombay. This master of the music hybrid called indie pop was once a taxi driver in San Francisco. Now he sports jewel-studded turbans, long jackets, and a mad flair for adapting Bhangra, his home state's folk music, into disco rock that appeals to the Y2K MTV generation. Mendy's first album, Bolo Tarara, which surely means something in Bhangra, has sold 2 million copies since its release in 1995. He's the perfect example of how being a cabbie doesn't mean you can't rock out to a flowing mix of reggae, rap, and rock once you get home at 5 a.m. on a weeknight. So, kind of cool, interesting, right? Good information, I guess. Some kind of trivia. Sadly, since I wrote this, Dollar Mendy has been convicted of human trafficking. So that's upsetting. Good times. All right, and that was my Crazy Taxi strategy for this issue. So moving on, now we have SaGa Frontier 2. So SaGa Frontier 2, I don't know if you've ever played a Saga game. I think you need to be a certain kind of roleplay gaming fan to play Saga games. I want to say that the very first Saga game that was released here was actually released as Final Fantasy Adventure on the Game Boy. I think that's right. I could be wrong about that. But the thing that I found, especially in this era, was the Saga games were gorgeous, and I found that they were very confusing, and I never really got into them. But for some reason we covered it, and I'm not really sure why. I think it was very popular in Japan. The thing you notice about this too is John, who was our editor-in-chief, and he would ultimately make the calls on what games we covered, is a big Japanese role-playing fan. I mean, he started 8.4. His job now is to translate usually role-playing games for different markets. So, he's that was his thing. So his biases, predilections, whatever, dictated what we would cover. Still a good game though, but I was shocked that we covered it. So let's read what this says. A boy, an egg, and a crying girl or two. From Jim Mazurek, if you're looking for a combat-heavy, non-linear RPG with plush graphics and a magnificent musical score, then SaGa Frontier 2 may be the game you've been dreaming of. However, if you're not one to drool over the thought of entering repetitive battles every 10 seconds or so, like me, and you absolutely hate having to make even simple decisions in-game like Andy Barron, this game isn't for you. With that off my chest, I think it's fair to say that SaGa Frontier 2 is a love-it-or-hate-it kind of game. You'll either love its use of clean graphics and the deep and involving storyline, or you'll hate it because the combat system and level-up structure are just plain ridiculous. Either way, it's worth checking out to see for yourself. Special thanks to Fernando Bustamante at Square EA for his help. So, I definitely sit squarely in the latter stage of this. That this game is not for me, but it is gorgeous. And sorry, I'm looking at my camera here, and there's an issue. Anyway, yeah. So I'm not going to dig into this too deeply because there's just so much information here. But you know, battle system made easy. It's spell points, weapon arts, combo arts, character roles, weapon points, life points. And then you have all these different specific weapon arts to deal with. Here's the map, and I think when I was looking at this, I mean, this is a beautiful layout. I really do like this a lot, and I think that it was probably the best way to go. But when I look at this, I always find it so funny because it's such a wonderful example of how confusing the game is. Because if you see, like, we've got this sort of chronological order of events framing this map, but then the reference points are all over the place, like 2, 7, 3, 4, 5, 6, 16, 7, 8, 9, 10, 16, 6, 8, 9, 8, 10, 11, 16, 17, like they're all over the place. And it's bizarre. And so I'm going to read how he wants us to use this map. This guide labels the different paths of SaGa Frontier 2 by event and coordinates them with a useful number system. These numbers represent the events that you can travel to upon completion of the previous event. So, if you beat the event Gustav Arrives, which is 1, you can now access 2 new events, 2 and 7. If you beat Gustav Exiled, which is 2, on the other hand, you'll only be able to access 1 new event, which is 3. See how it works? Very simple. I don't know that I'd say that. Knowing this, you should be able to plot a course through the game on your own. With a pad of paper, just jot down the different event numbers, noting that they are colored according to region, and you'll be well on your way to completing SaGa Frontier 2. Once you complete the game, you'll be able to make a save file and restart to complete the next wave of events. The cool thing is that you'll still have all your items and acquired arts. New Game Plus. This makes it much easier to complete the second or third time through. Such a bizarre game. Yeah, and then he starts to talk about all these different... Well, that's the thing. He's talking about... I think he's got everything labeled based on these numbers over here, because he is going in like a chronological order in here. But I will say, man, this game is absolutely beautiful. It still looks good today. But we put a lot of pages on SaGa Frontier 2, which I can't imagine was a big seller in North America. I could be wrong, but I can't imagine it was. We get into an ad here. Back issues of Expert Gamer. Not a lot of ads in this magazine once you get into the back half of it, which was normal. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. So, I actually didn't get any footage of this game because I couldn't find an emulator that would play it properly for me. And I don't own a copy of this on my Dreamcast. I don't have an SD card reader or anything for my Dreamcast. So, I do remember playing this, but JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is a fighting game. From Capcom, I believe. Yes, it was a Capcom game. So we're going to read what the author had to say. Strangest fighters around. Having only played the arcade game once, when I found out that JoJo's Bizarre Adventure was going to be released on the Dreamcast, I was thrilled. The DC version features 2 games on one disc, the original JoJo and its upgraded sequel, which never made it to the US arcades. Based in the world of the Japanese JoJo manga, specifically the 3rd series, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is a unique 2D fighting game with some very nice features. In particular, the stand system makes the game more interesting than your typical fighter. Unfortunately, though, not every character has a stand. The DC JoJo is definitely solid, but there aren't enough extras to keep you going forever. The PlayStation version has a lot more. However, if you're looking for a perfect arcade conversion or just a different kind of fighter, this is the game for you. It's very difficult. It's very beautiful. I don't really understand the stand system. They kind of describe it over here. It's the complete companion stand. For most characters, the stand appears alongside them when called and attacks in place of or along with the character. When a stand takes damage, the character is damaged as well. Then there's weapon stands that take the form of weapons, and an active stands, which just, I don't even understand. I don't know. Anyway, the interesting thing about this, I mean, you know, if you're interested in the game, then you're interested in the game, obviously. But to me, the interesting thing about this walkthrough is who wrote it. This is by Jeff CJC VC. I hope I'm saying that right. Which, you might know this, although it's, you know, the internet is old now. But he's the person who founded GameFAQs. And actually, the email here is facts@gamefax.com. So I thought that was kind of cool. We definitely referenced GameFAQs a lot making these guides. So I'm not going to go through this page by page, but it is, it's literally moves lists for every character. Again, this is a very bizarre game. I mean, the word bizarre is right in the title. It's really good, but it's a very like in my remembrance anyway, it's a very non-traditional Capcom fighting game, which can be good or bad, depending on what you're looking for. But again, we're spending a very niche game that we're spending a lot of pages on in this. And maybe that was good. I mean, maybe that was what people were looking for with our magazine. I'm not sure. Here we are with part 2 of the Gran Turismo 2 strategy that Jim Mazurek had done the previous issue. So Gran Turismo 2 part 2. If you missed our coverage on GT2 last month, well, you missed out on a lot. This month, however, we're diving even deeper into the simulation mode than we did last month. We'll be showing you the best cars in the game, Game Shark codes to unlock all gold trophies in the license tests, a complete car listing for the final version of the game, how to get the game up to that whole 98.2% completion fiasco, and we're even offering an XG Speed Challenge where you can win your very own racing wheel. Also, we picked up where the last guide left off, covering all the endurance events and the rally events. So buckle up, sit tight, and take it step by step. It's going to be a long ride to Beckettsville. Special thanks to Jimmy McShifter and his chrome shift knob of doom. So, yeah, this is really just more of the same from last month. Although we did throw a challenge in here, care of Jimmy McShifter, where you had to beat this quarter-mile time and speed that I'm sure that Jim set himself. We did that a fair amount. I always liked that we did that, and I'm sure that the Pelican actually gave us the racing wheel to give out. Third place was 1 bag of potato chips. I'd love to know if anyone actually got a free bag of potato chips out of this. Also worth pointing out is that the game only went to 98.2%, and it says here you'd expect to be rewarded for playing the game to 100% completion, but in actuality it's impossible. The farthest you'll be able to jack up that number is 98.2%. Apparently a drag racing event that was yanked out at the last minute made up for the extra 1.8% of the game. That's kind of cool. Also love this where we showed some Game Shark codes. And the description says, I would never recommend taking the easy way out, which is why we didn't print these codes last month, but in the case of GT2, I can't really blame you. If you're sick and tired of failing those license tests time after time, just pop in these codes and you'll have yourself a good old time. And that was a great idea because, yes, the biggest problem with these games early on was the licenses, because they locked all the content behind the licenses and they did get very difficult. Otherwise, yeah, this is just basically an outline of the cars to use for the endurance events and then the rally events after. And the rally courses, one thing that Jim calls out here says, although the rally courses are fun, the race events themselves don't offer much in the way of rewards. You'll get no cars or special prizes. The only thing you'll earn is credits and percentage toward completion. If winning all the rally events on your first try is your thing, then head over to Suzuki and check out the $2 million R Escudo Pikes Peak version for some serious ass kicking. It puts out 981 HP in a 1,763 pound car. That's unheard of. buy this car and you'll win every rally event in the game, excluding the races with HP limits. And actually, that car was a great car to use in general for a lot of the later events. And you'll see up here in the endurance events, like the Laguna Seca 200 mile, he's got the Pikes Peak Rome Circuit 2 hours, he's got the Pikes Peak. It was a great sort of all-arounder. It kind of broke the game, to be honest. And then we have a master car list. Again, this was stuff that I think people really loved back in the day, especially when the internet wasn't quite as prominent as it is now. I'm sure there were people who had this list open and were checking off the cars that they got. Very cool idea, and also really shows the depth of the game. On to Dragon Warrior Monsters. This was written by John Riccardi. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, John Riccardi, who was our editor-in-chief, I don't know that he'd ever written a guide before. It does not surprise me that the first and only, I think, guide that he wrote while he was working at Expert Gamer was for a Dragon Warrior game. John is a massive Dragon Warrior fan, and he always was. And you have to remember, at this point in time, like now Dragon Warrior, I mean, it was always huge, obviously, but it's got a much higher profile in North America, in the western side of the world, than it did at this point. At this point, we'd had Dragon Warrior 1 through 4 on the NES, and I think that was the last proper Dragon Warrior game that came to a home console, which was in like the early 90s. So it had probably been like 7 or 8 years since there'd been a real Dragon Warrior game on a home console. And then what we started getting was remakes. When Game Boy Color came out, we got Dragon Warrior 1, 2, and 3 on cartridge, and I don't remember if those were out before or after this came out. So Dragon Warrior Monsters, if you were a Dragon Quest / Dragon Warrior fan, was kind of a big deal in that it was a new Dragon Warrior game that, I don't know, just kind of signaled that they were getting serious about bringing the series here again. And after I'm saying all that, I think there were actually a couple Dragon Warrior games that came out on the PlayStation. I think Torneco's Quest or something like that it was called, but there hadn't been a proper sequel. Dragon Quest VII was on the way at this point. Anyway, Pokemon fans, take note. While many will undoubtedly try to label NX's Dragon Warrior Monsters as a Pokemon clone, this accusation couldn't be further from the truth. True, Dragon Warrior Monsters does share many similarities with Nintendo's mega popular RPG series, but it's definitely got a personality and feel all its own. Dragon Warrior Monsters gameplay is decidedly more battle-centric than Pokemon, with everything else taking a back seat to the action. The dungeons are all randomly generated, and the story is pretty minimal, but if you're a fan of Pokemon, you'd be wise to check out Dragon Warrior Monsters. I found it to be just as fun as addicting as the Big P, with the added bonus of being based upon my favorite RPG series of all time. Special thanks to Miwako Takaya for her invaluable translation assistance. I think this was John's girlfriend at the time. I don't remember. So again, this is another very niche game that we're giving a ton of ink to, but again, it's John's prerogative. He loves Dragon Warrior, he loves Dragon Warrior, so we covered Dragon Warrior. I'm going to just read this. About this guide, there are a ton of little nuances to the gameplay in Dragon Warrior, but to focus on each and every one of them would be a big waste of space. You can learn many of the basic gameplay tips and tactics simply by constantly talking to the villagers and warriors throughout the Great Tree. As a general rule, you should go back and talk to everyone again every time you either A, clear a room of Traveler's Gates, or B, advance in the arena rankings, as the townsfolk usually have new and often useful things to say. I'm not going to go through all that. It isn't Pokemon. It's not quite the same thing. And you do just have sort of a group of monsters that you can capture and carry around with you. And there's just a ton of little things to do. Clearing out gates, then going into the arena. That's kind of the gameplay loop. Like you go into these gates that you teleport, and they're just these little mazes where you fight monsters. And I think it's all random battles, if I remember correctly. And then you come back to the main town, and then you can go into the arena and challenge sort of the next tier of monsters, and you can get rewards there, and there's medals, and there's a whole story, and yeah, it's a pretty deep game. I will say that playing it now, and maybe even playing it back then, it moves very, very, very slowly, which is kind of a shame. But I mean, it was kind of neat also to see some of this classic, Dragon Warrior artwork coming back on your Game Boy Color. There's the dragon. I love the dragons in the first couple Dragon Warrior games. So that's cool. Again, it was nice to get a taste of sort of old school Dragon Warrior, but with this new play style. 31 Traveler's Gates, 22 of them available for completing the game, and 6 hidden ones, and additional 9 available after completing the game. I mean, it's very indicative of where a lot of role-playing games were going to go, I think, in that you're just overwhelmed with content and overwhelmed with pages in our magazine. Yeah, so that's all sort of the gates that he's talking about here, and the different bosses in each gate, which again, you could get the bosses to join you. There's King Slime, there's Mad Knight and Digster, and then you can go take these and fight the arena battles, and then get to the very end, the Starry Night tournament, getting your monsters up to level 40, a variety of special skills. So it was building a party. So it was like Pokemon in that regard, in that like you wanted to have monsters that had sort of I think they were elemental abilities, and then also like you wanted to have a monster that could heal. But when you got into battle, it also, if I remember properly, it had like an auto battle setting. So it was a nice way to speed the game up if you were fighting sort of little nothing monsters. You could just tell your monsters to go ahead and do the fight for you, but then you could also stop them and give them specific commands, especially if you wanted to use a certain kind of magic, or you wanted to use a certain kind of healing or something like that. I mean, we're still going. This is a lot of pages for this game. I'm really curious how this game even sold. Oh yeah, you can also breed monsters. So again, very much like Pokemon. Look at all these. The different families. Holy gosh. There's 20, 45... What is that? 25 more. So 70, 90, 110, 130, 155, 175, 200, 215 monsters. Next month, be sure to check back next month when we'll wrap up our DWM coverage. So this isn't even the full guide, with tons of cool post-game goodies and more. Gates, new arena battles, etc., as well as a sweet monster cookbook for how to breed the best monsters, and some other miscellaneous surprises. John was all in on that game. So here's, again, we're not doing previews. So last month, if you remember in the previous issue, we did do ostensibly a preview for Pokemon Gold and Silver, because it was on its way out, and the hype level was very high. And I mentioned multiple times that we were always looking for ways to get Pokemon on the cover and in the issue. And so this is what we went with this time, which is a DVD episode guide. Several Pokemon TV episodes available on DVD, 14 volumes so far. And because we're such big fans of not only the cartoon itself, but the DVD format in general, that makes us sound very old, we decided to compile a list of them for you to peruse. These are all available on VHS as well. We'll continue to keep you updated on all the cool happenings in the world of Pokemon each month, so be sure to check back often. So we weren't technically officially doing previews at this point, but I mean, this is, some pages dedicated to something that is not a game guide, but it's Pokemon. And hey, the first Pokemon movie coming on DVD. It's coming home. Mark your calendars. On March 21st, Pokemon, the first movie, will be released on VHS and DVD. DVD version features a slew of nifty extras. In addition to better picture and sound quality, Pokemaniacs will be treated to a special featurette from the Japanese director's cut titled The Story of Mewtwo's Origin. There will also be a sneak peek at Pokemon the second movie, due in theaters in July. A third Pokemon movie is in the works in Japan, entitled The Emperor of the Crystal Tower. The movie's plot is still a mystery, but you can expect lots of new Pokemon from the recently released in Japan Gold and Silver games. Cool. And of course, we're also covering the new Pokemon of the month. I think this is brilliant because, of course, Gold and Silver were coming out. They were already out in Japan, but they weren't out in the US at this point. So what better way to lead up to the release of them than to, feature some of the new Pokemon every month, because there were a lot of them. So yeah, I love this idea. This is great. And they have to call out that all the monster names are the Japanese versions and will most likely change for the US release. I do not know Pokemon well enough to know whether these changed or not. I assume they did. And here we are at the end of the issue, the Game Over. I loved Game Over. I loved when magazines did this. And Expert Gamer, I think, did it right up until its demise. So this is a Game Over for Dino Crisis, which was, of course, the cover game a couple issues ago. I think 2 issues ago at this point. And we cover actually 3 different endings here. I forget what triggers the different endings. Yeah, but it's not only showing the different endings, but the paths to follow in order to get them. So that's really cool. And then guess the game ending and win an Expert Gamer t-shirt. I wish I still have my Expert Gamer t-shirt. Who knew Eggplant could be so evil? Of course, that is Kid Nicky. No, just kidding. Kid Icarus. Anyway, that's what the ending of Dino Crisis looked like in screenshots, if you were curious. And we've got all the legalese back here. The ESRB rating system guide, which we did as a public service. Basically, again, I don't believe that page was ever paid for. Chips and Bits, which I definitely ordered from. There's the Lunar 2 Eternal Blue on the PlayStation. Nice. Funcoland, which I loved. I've talked about that in previous episodes as well. And here we got our next month. So next month, April 2000, who's the man? Gabe's the man, and we've got him covered. That's right, kiddies. Siphon Filter 2 is here, and XG won't miss one sneaky step. We'll tear the game apart with a complete walkthrough, full maps and secrets galore. You won't want to miss it. If spring's got you in the mood to hit the links, be sure to check out our complete guide to Hot Shots Golf 2. Plus, we'll feature Fear Effect, Galarians, The Misadventures of Tron-Bon, NASCAR Rumble, and more. Oh yeah, did somebody mention previews? So here we are, hinting at previews still. If I remember correctly, NASCAR Rumble is probably the game that I covered in this issue. Over at EGM, they were getting ready to talk about Perfect Dark and Donkey Kong 64. And over at the official PlayStation magazine, they were getting ready to talk about Siphon Filter 2 as well, plus WWF SmackDown, Ace Combat 3. And a huge demo disc, as usual. Ad for Game Cave at the end here. You know what wasn't in this issue was Win the Ultimate Gaming Rig. That might have been over by now. Here we are promising the Game Shark for the Dreamcast coming out in spring 2000. I assume that did come out, although I was not sort of into Game Shark at that point, so I don't know. Did it ever come out? Somebody linked that in the comments. And of course, GameShark.com. This is such a late 90s, early 2000s ad. Abuse the power, the official source for codes and more at hardcore gamers everywhere. And then on the back, hey, it's one of those Dreamcast ads without screenshots. This is, of course, for NHL 2K, which was a pretty highly anticipated game for me because I liked hockey games at the time. And, you know, the NFL games were great and the NBA game was great. This I remember being pretty good as well. Screen grabs suck. See it for real. SaGa.com. So that is Expert Gamer number 69. Yeah, I think it was my 4th or 5th issue. I think this may be the second time a game that I actually covered was on the cover. This is one of my favorite issues, mostly because Crazy Taxi was one of my favorite games to do a strategy guide for. I'd had a few good months at this point because, you know, started out with Grandia and Final Fantasy VI, which are 2 of my favorite RPGs. Then I got to cover Sega Rally 2, got to help with Gran Turismo 2, got to do Crazy Taxi, and obviously Expert Gamer number 70. I have a NASCAR Rumble guide in there. So anyway, I hope you really enjoyed that. Please leave your comments below. I would love to hear, did you have this magazine? Did you play any of these games? Do you think any of these strategies would have helped you? Or did they help you? Every now and then on social media, when I post pictures of the fact that I'm doing these Let's Reads, I get people posting back saying, hey, this was the first magazine I ever bought, or I remember having that issue. So hey, if you're one of those, leave a comment down in the comments below. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, be kind to one another, and I will be back at some point with Expert Gamer number 70. Goodbye.